Paul and I found each other to be somewhat familiar to each other, and then we discovered that we went to the same school at the same, roughly the same time. So that's kind of interesting. And so, but we had to really talk it through to realize, okay, yeah, it was really that long ago in this particular place. So, and I come from around here. I always lived most of my youth and right on Gerard Street between Cotswold and Woodbine. So this is a very familiar area around here for me. I used to go to the Prince of Wales Theatre, which was on the corner just down at Woodbine. I remember paying 35 cents to get in and watch Elvis Presley movies, and sometimes I watched them a couple of times. So I'm really familiar with this area.
Did you go to Beaumont Road Public School?
Beaumont Road, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Both my kids went there too.
No Planking High School.
Went to Beaumont Road, then on to Riverdale Collegiate, and then when they built Monarch Park, I went there. And I deliver Meals on Wheels for Wood Green in this area. I deliver them to various TCHC buildings, and Thursday's my day to do it, so that's what I was doing earlier this morning. And I go to places like the Bias House and various different Coatsworth and other places. So I'm really familiar with the area, and also somewhat familiar with poverty in this area too, because of the buildings I go in. So anyways, when I got out of government in 2003, and I like to say that I spent about 2/3 of my career building up the programs, and the last third tearing them down because of when my cars came in. And so I've been out of there now for about 7 or 8 years, and it takes you a long time to deprogram yourself and to start thinking in terms of what's wrong with the programs and to be able to be public about them. And I wrote a paper called $0 Linda, which about a woman who was who went back to work almost full time. She was making about $2,000 a month as a peer support worker at CAMH. And what happened to her is that her rent went up by 471% in her TCHC apartment, and her ODSP went from about 600 down to 183, and she had to quit her job and go back. And when I wrote that, then I got contracted by a group called the Dream Team, which is psychiatric survivors, and HouseLink, which provides housing and supports, and CAMH, which you already know. And so that's because I just looked at one person in this first one, and now I was trying to look at the wider system. And I thought some of the stuff in the wider system, this report will come out later in May, and it might be something that you would be interested in, and we'll see how the newspapers and the public and all that sort of hear it and read it and think about it, and so you're getting a preview of it tonight. I thought would be a good way to conduct this. So I'm going to first talk about, I put a few jokes all the way through, and this first one says, of course, the first rule of effective management is active participation. You can see that there's one person in the room, so we're already past that. Now, what we have at the beginning of the report is, and this is what we thought from one person, Sharon, who worked while she was receiving ODSP, said the rational person would say, what's the point of working? The majority of people work to get ahead, not to get behind. And so for a lot of people who don't leave ODSP, or don't leave OW in some cases too, find that all the different programs that come together, whether it be legal aid, whether it be housing, whether it be daycare, whether it be social assistance itself, that all the programs sort of move together in a way that makes it harder to be on, to remain in work, because the taxes that come from it are so high. So what I'm going to do is introduce you to working in ODSP, some basic facts, and some of the recommendations we're going to make. So this second cartoon says that here it appears to be some sort of staff development presentation. You can see it's done in the caves, right? So that's the idea. So I want to first tell you that, when somebody says, so-and-so's, people who don't know about disability programs, they'll say somebody's on disability. And I know in the outreach work that I do, I always start off with the question, well, could you tell me what program of disability the person's on? And often I get the reaction, oh, you know, they're on disability. It's not, I don't know which one it is, and that sort of thing. And so I started thinking about that and found that there's basically 7 programs. So when we say people are on disability, we're talking about 7 different programs. And it's not just one, because people can be on different programs at the same time. And in no particular order, ODSP is one of the big programs that when people say they're on disability, they're on that program, usually because they're low income or because they've never been in the labor force. Okay? The second, a bigger program than you might think, is veterans disability programs that actually spend billions of dollars. And normally we think of them as sort of a residual program, but they're really not. They're really quite large. Canada Pension Plan Disability, or otherwise sometimes called CPPD, is the third one. And it's funded by the federal government, and of course it comes out of your pay. So doesn't come through general income tax. It comes out of what's called payroll tax. The fourth one is WSIB, which is Workers' Safety and Insurance Board, which is sometimes called workers' comp. And it's totally paid for by employers. Of course, employers have to fund it themselves. And it's basically there for people who are injured in the workplace. The fifth program is EI sickness. Again, it's a small program. It only goes for 15 weeks. There's been a lot of advocacy to get it to go beyond 15 weeks. But EI sickness is, and it's also a program that's paid through a payroll tax. And what that means is when you look at your pay, you see your tax, your EI and your CPP. So that's called payroll tax because it comes off your payroll. But only 2 of them come off your payroll, EI and CPP, even though there's 7 programs. The 6th is disability tax credits, which are paid through the federal government as tax credit against taxes that are paid. And I think the amount right now is a credit of about $7,200. And then finally we have private company disability insurance and programs that various companies do. And generally, the better job you have, the better disability plan that you have. So those are the big 7. And an honorable mention goes to a new program called the RDSP, which is Registered Disability Savings Plan, which is just starting to get on its feet as a program where people can put money into it, and the government puts money into it that can help people. This is a program for parents who put the money in for their sons and daughters, etc. So 7 or 8 great big programs, and the one thing I want you to notice from this is that of the 7 programs here outside of the RDSP, 5 of them only pay money when you've been working. So let's look at veterans. You've been working in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force. CPPD only comes because it's taken off your payroll. Workers' Safety and Insurance Board is injured workers. EI sickness only if you've worked. So it's and private disability company benefits, of course, only come through the company, so that means you work. So there's only 2 programs, ODSP and disability tax credits, that are there in place for people who have not had a large-scale attachment to the workforce. So our whole disability system is geared toward benefits for people who have been working, and that's where most of the money is. And so if you've been working and you can stay off ODSP, what you find is that if you have a long-term attachment to the labor force, say you became later onset in life of disability, what you find is that these disability programs can provide a reasonably decent income, sometimes as high as $30,000 or $40,000 to people if they have multiple issuances in these programs. ODSP deducts them all, but if you can stay off of ODSP, the programs all stack. In other words, one right on top of the other, and you keep them all. So there's a lot of inequality within the disability benefit world when you have 5 programs that all stack and ODSP that subtracts them all. And that's a whole question of how the programs work in the first place. So when somebody asks me if they're on, they say so-and-so's on disability and they need help, I always say which program is it, and then we have to go through that to discussion of which of those 7 or the combination of the 7 that they're actually on. So, and each of these programs started with a different philosophy, and it each had different ideas about whether persons with disabilities can work. CPPD, for example, says you got to be basically unemployed. They'll let you work up to about $4,000 or $5,000 a year, but then they start to get antsy about it. And if you work more than that, then it's an all or nothing program where you either get it or you don't. It's not one that has like a clawback the way ODSP has. And then you get other programs that pay for a limited amount of time. You get others that pay without being taxed. Veterans programs aren't taxed, but the CPP programs are taxed. So because they all came up at a different time, whatever philosophy we had in 1914 when workers' compensation came out, it's almost like you can look at when the program started and say, that's what they were thinking back then, and here's the program. CPPD started in 1966, ODSP was 1998, but it's basically the Gaines program from an earlier era that goes back to 1973. So each one of them came up at a different time, at a different level of government, and I can tell you right now that if you were to try to invent a series of programs, you would not invent the particular group that we have today. They've just grown up from various different times and various different governments. But most of them were designed in the 1960s, and so they were looking at a time when they say people with disabilities are not working, we don't expect them in society to work, they don't expect themselves to work, but at the same time now we have these programs designed for non-work 40, 50 years later in a situation where people with disabilities do want to work, where there's somewhat of a little more societal expectation, and these programs are really designed for the past in many ways.
But work is also very healing.
Absolutely, but that's the point. There was when these programs were designed, it was like there was an expectation that people with disabilities would stay home. If you remember the old hockey game, it would say, welcome to people who were actually shut in, like closed doors was what the hockey, and that wasn't too long ago. And so even though we've changed, people have changed, the programs haven't, and that's a big message of this. So ODSP really differs from all the other major disability programs in 3 important ways. ODSP pays benefits specifically designed for low-income beneficiaries. The other programs don't. They don't really look at your income in the same way. The programs provide payments to people who have never worked. None of those other 5 programs I talked about don't do that. And the disability tax credit only provides a credit against tax itself, so it's not really a program in the same sense of providing money to people who are in a low-income situation. Now, and thirdly, ODSP encourages workforce participation, does not cancel benefits due to entry into the labor force. Even though I expect some sighs or some long looks at that, I can tell you that ODSP, unlike CPPP, or CPP, doesn't actually end its eligibility just because you work. If you go on CPP and you work, say, more than $5,000, they cut you off completely. At least in ODSP's case, what it does is say, we encourage you to go out to work, we won't cut you off, but we'll reduce your rates. So that's different than the other programs, like workplace programs. If you go back to work, then they don't exist anymore. It's only when you go out. So some programs are all or nothing propositions. CPP is sort of a share proposition, but again, in a very onerous way. Many unemployed ODSP recipients want to work. Working enhances self-esteem, that's your point, self-worth, sense of control. And CMHA has said that the leading component in promoting positive mental health and paving the way for a rich and fulfilling life in the community is through work. It's also a way to leave poverty behind, and Canada has one of the highest proportions of relative income poverty of persons with disabilities. So one of the things that we showed of the 39 rich countries in the world, that people with disabilities in our country have one of the lowest incomes of all those nations, and that's one of the things that we use in terms of advocacy.
It also alleviates symptoms of mental illness work. Can alleviate.
Yeah, it's just even at that pointed that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meds,
Yeah,
the reduction of medication.
Yeah.
It's all those things.
yeah.
I worked with this woman named Linda Chamberlain who's
Yeah, I know
told
her.
the
I know her.
Yeah,
who
I know.
told the legislature 2 weeks ago that when she was working, she was 61 going on 20, but now that she's not working, she's 61 going on 90. So that's the difference. So this one says I've to train you to confront difficult people and to raise your hands if you're a difficult person. When I did this with the dream team, everybody in the room raised their hands, so they're a difficult crowd. So I'm going to tell you a few facts about ODSP now. In December 2010, almost 70% were people who were actually, of the people who were receiving ODSP, were actually blind or disabled and certified on ODSP. Some of them were in the old FBA program, and some of them, you can see almost a quarter, 23%, were in the old permanently unemployable category. So we have different people from different eras that are on the ODSP program. And as time goes on, everybody will eventually be on the ODSP program and judged by the same definition of disability. Interesting, you find this slide interesting because it breaks down what their disability actually is. And so if we go from the top left-hand corner, other physical illnesses and conditions that are not enumerated, diseases of the musculoskeletal system is 13%, or about 1 in 7. Diseases of the circulatory system, like various sorts of heart disease and arteries, is about 4%. Diseases of the nervous system, like Parkinson's disease, is about 10%. Developmental delay, including Down syndrome, in other words, people who have developmental disabilities, is about 18%, or just under 1 in 5 people. Neuroses and depression is 17%. So again, you're looking near about 1 in 6 people who are on ODSP are on there because of neuroses and depression. And then finally, psychoses such as schizophrenia, it's 21% of the program. So people with psychiatric disabilities of various sorts, non-physical and non-developmental, make up about 40% of ODSP as of December 2010. So if you were inside the program, that's the sort of breakdown that you'd be looking at. Now, in terms of the length of time people have been on ODSP, and this is of the people who are on the program, almost 60% have been on for over 5 years. So it's a long-term type of program. And those who have been on for 36 to 59, in other words, from 3 years to 6 years, in the yellow group are about 1 in 6, 1 in 7 on the program. And finally, those who have been on for the last, for 0 to 36 months or 3 years, make up about a little over a quarter of the program. So a lot of the people who are on ODSP are recent entrants and midterm entrants, and then the larger part of people who have been on the program for over 5 years. And where do people live who are receiving ODSP? 61% are in the private market.
Wow.
So that means that they're renters, largely renters, in the private market. They're non-owners. And you can see that renters in subsidized, so people who are in subsidized housing, are 14%. That's about 1 in 7 people on ODSP are in subsidized housing, like TCHC, Mainstay Housing, all the various different co-ops and that sort of thing. Boarders, these will be largely people with developmental handicaps, are living at home for family and friends. That means they get their meal and their lodging from the same source, is about 15%. Surprisingly, to me, 6% actually own their own homes who are receiving ODSP, and that's usually for good planning on the part of their parents, or if they had late onset disability in life where they'd already bought a home and then became disabled and then became poor, then they'd still be able to keep their home. And others in various other types of non-specified housing are 5%. Now, if we look at the family makeup of people who receive ODSP, you can see that 64% are singles without children. So that's the rate. That's almost 2/3 of everybody who receives ODSP is in that situation. You can see that 15%, that's the yellow slice of the pie, are couples with children. 15% are couples without children, in other words, lone parents, single parents of one sort or other, mostly women, because I've seen those stats. And then finally, you have the couples without children are 15%, sorry, and singles with children is the 6%. That's the lone parent category. So that's a very small part of it, but that's the family composition of ODSP. And then here we go into earnings. And sorry, this is a little bit vague, so I'm going to go up there. This is singles without children, and it's just looking at how much they made. If you're a single without children, I can tell you that, first of all, 11% of everybody on ODSP has earnings of some sort. So 11%.
Wow, that's good.
89% do not.
Oh.
So ODSP has a very high unemployment rate. We don't know exactly what the unemployment rate is because you have to look at who's in the labor force in the first place. And there's many people receiving ODSP who are not in the labor force. That would be the most relevant percent. But just so you know, 11% work and have reported earnings, and 89% do not. That's the one thing I can tell you. What they make, if they're single without children, this shows that they make a little over $400 a month that they report. Couples without children are up about $1,200. Couples with children are up about $1,400, and then the single parents are around the $800 point. And then all of them put together, then you get about $560 a month that they make on average. But remember, this is only the 11% who work. Yes?
I was on ODSP last year without working, and I was legally single, and I made $586 without any kind of like special food benefit
So
or.
you're in subsidized housing?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about, I think he's talking about employment earnings here. Are you
Yeah,
talking
these are employment earnings.
These
Oh.
are employment earnings.
This is how much they made from their earnings. This is not how much of the combined amount of ODSP and their earnings. It's just saying here's how much they made on average.
I plan to make $2,000 a month when I leave ODSP to start, if I go back to security work, and I might go back to school as well. You're saying that amount there makes $1,200 a month?
That particular family constellation.
Oh, the family,
yeah.
not the singles.
Yeah.
Okay,
This is just telling you some basic data
Okay,
on the
okay.
on the program.
Because I thought if you're making $1,200 a month as a single, they might. Do they take you off?
No, you'd be still on for about $400.
Okay.
I get money from Canada work.
You're getting from Ontario work.
Yeah, some.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a concept in the program we call a break-even point.
Yeah.
And if you earn, if you're on OW for the maximum, which is $592, you could make all the way up to about $14,000 a year before they knock you off the program. But remember-
14,000?
Yeah, but remember your check's only going to be for about $5 or $6.
Now the other thing is my rent will go up. My rent will go
Are you
up.
in subsidized housing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah, your rent will go up, but ODSP will cover the rent up to $469.
I see.
Yeah.
Because I think my rent is my
Your
market rent
rent's now 109 or something like that?
139, but my market rent value is 800.
Well, your market rent value would be 800 if you made $2,400 a month.
I see.
See, it's based
I'd
on,
like to make that anyway.
yeah. What happens is you go from the ODSP scale to the RGI scale, which is rent geared income scale.
Right.
And you go to that, once you pass $440 in earnings, they put you forward to the rent geared income scale.
Right.
Yeah, now I've been protesting that that's too low. I've been to the legislature protesting that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I told them that.
Thank you
I
very
can even
much.
show you what I said in the legislature if you're interested. So the unemployment, as I already said, I always get ahead of myself, is 89%, and this is more than 11 times the rate of unemployment in Ontario. It's more than 5 times the rate of unemployment among persons with disabilities overall. So something's wrong with ODSP when you have that few people working who are choosing to take work. We can take into account that there are a lot of people who are not going to go in the labor force because they're too disabled to do so. We know that, but at the same time, 11% is too low. That's the basic point there. And under the ODSP, we remember the program treats income in 3 ways. It exempts some income in full. It doesn't touch it. Like the refundable tax credits, like your HST credit or your GST credits and child benefits, they don't touch them. Exempted in part.
They used to take half the child tax benefit.
Yes, but they don't.
They don't do
since
that now?
August 2008, they don't take any part.
Oh, wow, okay.
Exempted in part, partly clawed back, are earnings from employment, so they take 50% of your net income. And if you have a boarder, for example, they'll charge you $100 or something like that. And then not exempted, here's the rub for many people, is that programs like EI, CPP, disability, and child support are deducted at 100%. So dollar for dollar comes off your benefits, and that's especially a problem with Canada Pension Plan disability. Earnings are deducted at a rate of 50% of each net dollar earned from the first dollar. So you make $1, you're going to have 50 cents come off your allowance. An ODSP recipient with $200 in net earnings would have $100 deducted from their net entitlement. However, all ODSP recipients with earnings also receive a job-related benefit, some kind of WRB, some people call it JRB. Anyways, it's work-related benefit that gives you $100 a month no matter what you earn. Okay. And I got some examples here, but rather than going through that, you'll get a copy of this presentation.
Yes.
I'm sure anybody who wants it. This just goes through some of the examples, so that in the interest of time, I'll go by it. And there are 3 other aspects to policy and administration of earnings. Monthly reporting and reconciliation of earnings required by ODSP regulations. It's a very onerous system. It's a very closely managed system, and we argue that it doesn't need to be like that. The treatment of ODSP earnings in combination with earnings and income treatment by other programs like subsidized housing. I can tell you right now, if you are on legal aid and child support and getting daycare subsidy and in subsidized housing and getting ODSP and you're trying to get an OSAP loan, the way those programs come together is toxic. They each deduct each other and they cannibalize each other, and you get one, the other one falls back to the point where if you're getting multiple subsidies, you in many cases can, for every $1 you make, you'll actually be losing more than $1. And then the government says to you, well, we want you to go back out to work, the public expects you to work, but they don't face that sort of clawbacks on the system. So the way all those programs interact with each other, they're all trying to get money back, and rather than look at the net amount you get, a lot of them, like subsidized housing, looks at the gross amount, not the net amount. Next thing you know, you got your rent going sky high and your ODSP going down so low, so the people who are actually attempted employment have to quit.
That's right.
Yeah. Program changes that occur when ODSP recipients leave ODSP when their earnings rise to the point where their ODSP entitlement is reduced to 0. What happens, depending on how much money that you get from ODSP, will determine where the point that you exit ODSP. So if you were to say, try to get a rule that said, okay, how much do I have to make before I go off of ODSP? It's different for everybody. For some people it's 24,000, for other people it's 18,000. We have to know the specifics of your situation to know what that's going to be. Basically, as a rule of thumb, take the amount you get from ODSP, double it, and that's the amount that you can make before you'll go off ODSP entirely. But you keep the drug and dental card, which is very important.
How long do you keep the drug and dental card for?
Indefinitely.
And if you're making how much a month?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you make. As long as your company doesn't have a drug program, you can keep the...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And that's fairly recent. So this is a joke saying, when did the training wheels come off? For computer. Okay, so we have 4 sets of recommendations that you're going to hear later this month when this paper comes out called What Stops Us from Working. We want to improve work, the exemptions. We want to improve administration, customer service. We want to change how all these overlapping programs come together to keep people from working, and implement structural changes to ODSP like ESOP, which is employment startup benefits, the asset treatments, and the training. And we're asking the government to improve the work incentives by increasing the job-related benefit to $150 a month from $100, and allow people during their first year of work to keep up to $300 of their earnings before being plowed back. And that would parallel what they're going to do in housing, because housing, as of next January, is not going to put up rents for a year once you start working. Okay?
Well, can you explain that, sir?
Yeah, starting in January, if you start to work in January while you're on ODSP, your rent won't go up. They won't review it until a year.
Thank you.
It's gone by. At least that's what they've said so far. So it only seemed reasonable that if housing is going to give you a 1-year break, that ODSP should give you a 1-year break also.
I'm already working.
And that's what we're recommending.
I've been
I'm already working.
24 years,
That's
and
fine.
25, going over 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is only benefit.
The one that's already in place is for people who would start working, but we have a method in our process here, and the method is if it starts to show that people actually, if it goes up from 11% employment up to 15 or 20, that people actually start to work, then we'll come back and recommend that they keep it going.
For people already working, there's no benefit like that?
There's no, yeah, the one recommendation here that we would up the work-related benefit to $150, that allow an exemption of a year for people who started working for the first time.
Oh, for the first time starter.
But remember, then we'd have a paper a year from now. This is a strategy. Try to pry open the box and then keep it open later. Yes?
I think that it's totally unfair that we're being clawed back at all when we're earning under the poverty line so abysmally. We're earning half of the money of the poverty line,
Right.
and we're still being clawed back. We shouldn't be clawed back penny one until we meet the poverty line.
Yeah. The ODSP
Because
action group.
You want to give us $150, and I'm grateful
Mhm.
for an increased job-related benefit, but it cost me $200 to buy a winter coat.
Right.
You know, you see what I mean? I'm
Yeah,
going
absolutely.
into debt to try and outfit myself to go to work. That's ridiculous. I shouldn't
Yeah.
have to do that.
Yeah, agreed. This is, what we're doing here is a strategy to do something modest, to open the door and then
Mhm.
allow others to come in that same door and say, look, we've taken it this far. The problem with today's environment, our political environment, years ago, going back to Glendon in the 70s, I'll tell you, the old way of doing things, you'd say, look, if you want to get the moon, you ask for the stars. Ask for something.
But all these
really big.
incentives should have been in now, because I want to go off, I want to have the incentives and the support to go off. And they should have been there a long time ago.
Absolutely agree. But what we're saying here is open up a little bit, because we know the government's going to come back and say to us they don't have any money,
Of course.
which is what they do all the time. But these proposals are very modest, but they open up the way to allow some people to start into work, prove they do, then go back to them and ask for more. That's the strategy. It's a modest strategy. It's not going as far as many other groups do, but we're hoping if we can make some modest changes, then that will lead to larger changes.
If the number of people who are on ODSP move from 11% to 20%, wouldn't the cost of ODSP to government go down?
Bingo, right. So when somebody says, where's the money going to come from, we'll say from the savings that you already made.
That's why you should have the incentives there.
Yeah.
So if you can provide incentives for people who are able to work through work, then that saves government money. So.
Right. So we'll say if that happens, then and we think it would. I mean, a number of people have told us that they would go back to work if these things are in place. Just the housing one's a good one.
Yeah.
Bartolucci brought in the 1-year thing, and partly we told them, the Minister of Housing, that people, the whole idea that they would get like a, if a boss asks you to work 3 more hours, then the next month you're gonna get an overpayment and your rent's gonna go up. He said, I don't believe that. And I says, well, check your own program, because that's how it works. And then and people think overpayment means that somehow you're cheating or something. The overpayment is systemic, it's part of the program.
I'm just wondering if people that are working part-time, is there any talk about, you know, how they have, the ODSP looks at your gross earnings, not your net earnings. Is there any talk about looking at the net earnings and not the gross earnings to determine your
No, they look at net earnings now, ODSP.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was gross earnings.
No.
I'm sorry.
They looked at gross years ago under the old gains program. That they looked at net,
So what's the difference?
net of income tax, CPP, EI, and I think even you do say, yeah.
I don't think your rent should be reviewed if you're in subsidized housing right off the bat just because you're working.
Well, they're changing that in January.
But you said it was just for people who are starting to work.
No,
That's for everybody.
no,
For everybody?
that's for everybody.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, so people.
That's good
So
news.
it's gonna give a lot of people a chance to do it.
That's
Now, your
excellent.
review period might come up before the year, just saying that it's gonna be up to a year that allow people.
That's excellent.
And the point is, it allows them to put, when you have your period of highest expenses, which is when you begin, or at least that's what we've discovered when we looked at what happens to people, they gotta buy work-related stuff.
Yeah.
Just getting yourself going.
Yeah.
And so,
I like that.
at the 1 year point, when it finally comes in, then at least you're a little bit better off. You could possibly think at that point, can I go off ODSP at this point?
That's
Or do I
excellent.
stay on?
I like that.
But what you're saying, John, just to clarify,
Yeah.
is that your rent is reviewed once a year. So let's
Yeah.
say your rent is reviewed in January.
My rent is reviewed in December.
So your rent's
You're one of the
reviewed in
lucky ones.
December. If you start working in January, then your rent won't be reviewed
I'm already
until the
working,
following.
yeah.
But if you start making more money,
Oh,
your rent won't be reviewed until the following December.
Right.
However, if you start working in November, a month before your rent is reviewed, then your rent's gonna go up a month after you start working.
I think it could, but they were still talking about going a full year.
Okay.
I
So
know what you're
4
saying.
years.
I had the exact same question you did. Are they gonna start doing it on a cycle, or are they gonna give people the full year?
Mhm.
And I got sort of a half answer, so it's one, let's watch and see exactly how they do it. They haven't figured out exactly, see, the change, at Bill 140, which is the act, change the Housing Act, only,
still, it's a step in the right direction. What you're saying.
yeah, it's only the act itself that's in the House for review. The regulations, which is what decides what the rents will be in the time periods and that, has not been added to the legislation, but that will happen very soon. So I haven't seen the whites of its eyes sort of thing, like to be able to read the actual text and say, it's only when they add those regulations, and that's why we've all been into the House complaining to the all-party committee to say, look, we should change it. Michael Prue was very good in terms of, and so was Christine Elliott from the Conservatives of all people, were 2 MPPs who were saying, we really need to review these rent scales. So
Good.
they're all there
Good.
cheering. It's just that the rent scales aren't part of the lawmaking process. It's long and complex. You need to be aware of it and understand it, but that's the reality, yes.
What about, instead of asking for a set number like 150 and 300, saying to increase those numbers to match inflation, and also to increase the amount that ODSP goes up each year to match inflation?
That's a big problem right now. And the reason it's a problem is because inflation for poor people, or people with lower incomes, is a lot higher than people with higher incomes right now. Why? Because core inflation does not include food, and core inflation does not include energy. And the highest item in inflation outside of food and energy is transportation. The 3 largest expenses of low-income people are food, energy, and transportation through hydro bills, through food costs, and through bus passes. That's not the case for others. If you ask for cost for it to go with the cost of living, you'll actually get less. And that has a lot to do with the times we're living in, the fact that gold and oil are going to the moon and all this sort of thing. But asking for that, I'll give you an example. Back in 2003, there was a bunch of people who were advocating for the minimum wage to have an immediate $2 increase and then be indexed to the rate of inflation. There's a lot of people asking for that. Had that come to pass, the minimum wage right now would be $7.85 an hour, and it's $10.25. So going with the rate of inflation is actually something that goes counter. The indexation actually goes counter to low-income people right now. It's not always going to be the case. I mean, at other times it's been housing that's been going up, and the cost of housing and the price of other things, what we call assets. But right now it's food, energy, and transportation that's going up, and that's the three highest costs to low-income people. And low-income people are facing a rate of inflation that's way higher than the general rate. So that's just something to think about.
I have a question regarding, like, the allowing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you had to go back to it, because okay, that, the allowing, you know, the first $300 that they can keep,
Yeah.
you say, and then afterwards, the rest will be clawed back. But then how much clawed back?
50%.
Only 50, okay.
Yeah, that's what we're advocating for anyways right now.
Okay.
But again, it's a strategy. Start
Yeah,
with
yeah,
that.
but I'm
Let's
just
write
asking
another
because
paper.
it
Yeah.
because it was like more than that.
Yeah, under the old rules, you kept 160, and then they took 75%.
Yeah, I see.
And depending who you were and where you were, you either were better off with that or you weren't. Yeah.
Is there any chance that the half, because I think half is still too much of a clawback, as far as incentives for working and surviving and paying for everything and bills and expenses and living expenses and all that. It's still a very significant clawback, considering the ODSP check is not really much of a living expense
Yeah.
for a single person, at least, anyways.
Yeah.
This is a conversation I had with John before we began, was the whole question about how the ODSP allowance is determined, and the assumption I made is sort of from a public policy perspective, we should be saying that we give people enough to live on. ODSP should be enough to live on, but
I'd still work if I had enough of
But it's not. I mean, what you all know is that what you get on ODSP is not enough to meet your costs of rent and food and other things.
But even if I had enough ODSP to live on, I'd still work. Work is important to me. Work is everything to me.
If we had, if you look in terms of take out the cost of living, in 1973, ODSP was, under the Gains program, $250 more per month than it is now. So that shows you've lost $250 a month since 1973.
That's
because
unbelievable.
of the increases. Because Paris didn't increase it between, there was an increase between 1993 and 2004. There was 11 years with no increases. At the very same time that people, and I don't hold it against it, but people who are aged, they got quarterly indexation, and they had 48 increases when ODSP had none. So that shows you.
And the increases they've given now are like $10,
Yeah.
20.
Yeah.
It's
1%.
insignificant.
Yeah. And if it went with inflation, it'd even be lower, just because inflation affects low-income people far more than it does higher income.
Thank you.
So we want to improve administration by reconciling accounts yearly instead of monthly. So no monthly reporting, if somebody wants to, what we're recommending is going like the gas company. The gas company says you can go on equal billing every month, or you can pay depending on what your actual bill is. So you wouldn't pay in the summer and then you would pay in the fall. We'd say it should be the recipient's choice how to do that. Some people still want to do monthly reporting. Why? Because they don't want to get overpayments charged up. Others say, look, I'd rather know what everything is going to be each month the same, so let me go on that system. And we're just saying if the gas company can do it, if the hydro company can do it, if property tax can do it, then ODSP can do it. They got the computer systems to do it, and give people who are receiving the program choice as to how to do it. So that's what this one's about. And only reconcile it once a year. If housing can do it, then MCSS can do it. And what we're saying is, if they say, no, that's a crazy idea, and I said, well, here's your colleague, Mr. Bartolucci, he's the Minister of Housing, I guess he's crazy, right? You know, that's sort of the example that we want to give them, that this is your own people that have already done it in housing, no, you parallel it over here. This is from a training thing. This is about the teacher is actually saying, next go to the guard menu and select bark. I thought it was funny. So we're also saying change how ODSP interacts with other supports. Remove the 440-hour rule. That's the one, the $440 rule, sorry. That's when you go from the ODSP rent scale in housing, which is 109 to 139, and you know, depending on how many extras you got. But it's basic.
It's been 139 for me for a long time.
Yeah, so that means it's 109 basic and 30 whatever your add-ons are in your service. Is it utilities?
I'm not sure. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Anyways, it's 109 basic, but it's 139, 129. I hear people with 149. Some people with 99 because they pay something, you know, it's all over the place. But if you go over 440 in income from any source, you're going to go over to RGI. So it's going to be 30%. So you make $2,000, that's 30%, your rent's going to $600.
Rent goes to 600?
Yeah.
Because they told me my rent value, the market rent for my apartment is 800 something.
Market rent, that's market rent, which means that's the point where it maximizes. They won't charge you any more than that.
So if I make over 440, I go to RGI,
You go to RGI, which is 30% of your earnings.
and my rent will go up to 600 if I make how much?
Well, you work it out. Like if you're at $1,000 in earnings, right?
Yeah.
And it's 30%, then you're going to pay $300 in rent.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
When your income goes up to the point where $440 is more than 30%, it's less than 30% of your income. So it's not the $440.
It doesn't work like that.
No?
Yeah.
I understand your
Kind of
service.
works.
I understand.
There's a half-truth to that. But the easier way to say it is that when any of your income, from outside income, not including tax credits and that, goes above 440, you're going to switch over to the RGI. It triggers you to that.
But it has to be consistent. Like for me, my income goes all over the place. So
Yeah.
my TCHC guy, he said, okay, and he keeps my rent the same because some months, like over the course of the year, it wasn't consistently
Sounds like a good
440.
guy.
He was a good guy.
Okay,
He is a good
There's a
guy.
lot of good guys, and there's a lot who are not so good. The TCHC rules tells him not to do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so,
Because some months it's like my income's like $100, and other months.
buy him a birthday card. Because he's taking a risk.
Oh, he does it for all of the people in. Like I live in a small townhouse thing. Yeah, he does it for all of
They
them.
do it, but what he's supposed to do, if you go by the black letter of the law, he's supposed to go, once you go over 440, you're supposed to go to RGI, and then you're supposed to go down. Now, there is something in it for him that he doesn't have to do all these calculations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, just to clarify, so if I make $2,000 a month, my rent goes up by 600 from the 139. So it'll be 7.
Well, it's 30% of 2,000, so what's that, 600, right?
Yeah.
30%, it's 300 on each 1,000, so 2,600.
But what I'm saying is that adds on to the 139, right?
No.
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 Changes
They
in
switches
this.
over to another scale.
Oh, so it's $600 a month.
The
Then.
problem with it is ODSP will only pay you up to 469.
Yeah.
So you're paying for the last 131 on your own.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I can't figure out why they did that absolutely from CPP disabled to ODSP, because I'm on both, right? I work for them.
Yeah.
Really confusing.
Yeah, well, one of the worst interfaces is CPP and ODSP.
Yeah.
You got people who are trying to earn a bit of money, and once then they force you to apply for CPP. You get the CPP, and then the amount of earnings would take you off ODSP, and then you don't get your mandatory special necessities. You don't. You got your drug card. It's not supposed to be in jeopardy, but if you get cut off, you can lose those for a bit. And the problem with that 440 rule too is if you start to earn, then you have to, if you get knocked off of ODSP, you're off for a month, then you have to reapply, and then they'll apply the 469.
How long does it take if you have to reapply to get back on?
Well, you're supposed to have automatic
Supposed to be, yeah,
reinstatement, right?
supposed to be.
Okay, I didn't know
Try to
that.
work.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But the- So,
Thanks.
so I just wanna, that makes no sense to me, that if you make 440 1 month, all of a sudden you're bumped into this other